The desert sun scorched the cracked metal of the abandoned research outpost on Valtros Vive, an unforgiving world on the edge of the Galactic Federation's charts. Daryl Knox, a rugged human salvage mechanic with grease-stained hands and a gaze hardened by years of hardship, stepped cautiously through the shattered remains. 3 years had passed since the Galactic Council had declared this zone off-limits, marked by their ruthless order to terminate any biological specimens left behind. He wasn't here by choice. A last-minute job to recover scrap parts for his ship had dragged him into the dead zone. But something made him stop. Ahead lay Enclosure 7B, its transparent dome fractured and scorched, the once vibrant alien flora inside now dry and brittle. The warning sign flickered ominously. Warning, Varnakian shadow wolf, female, plus offspring, 4, biological termination order, active, entry strictly prohibited by Galactic Federation. Order 77.3b curiosity, and a gnawing unease pushed Daryl closer. Inside crouched a figure both mesmerizing and terrifying. The Varnakian shadow wolf was an apex predator native to this dead world, known for its cunning and unmatched ferocity. Her fur was the deepest black, absorbing light, making her almost invisible even in the harsh glare of the twin suns. 4 cubs, fragile and desperate, hid behind her, their wide eyes tracking every movement. These creatures had been left to die, abandoned by the galactic aliens in a cold act of mercy, or perhaps cruelty, a decision made in sterile council chambers far from the scorching sands, where survival meant nothing. Daryl's heart clenched. The same instinct that had kept humans alive through centuries of cosmic wars stirred within him. Against every warning, against every protocol he'd been drilled to obey, he reached out. The wolf's amber eyes locked with his, fear, defiance, and something else, an ancient plea. Could he turn away? Could he let the Galactic Federation's cold judgment sentence this proud mother and her innocent cubs to oblivion? As the desert wind whispered through the ruins, Daryl made a choice that would forever alter the fate of a species, and perhaps of the galaxy itself. A second thought had become a revolution. Daryl's fingers trembled as he reached out, not with tools or weapons, but with something far rarer in this unforgiving galaxy: compassion. The Varnakian shadow wolf snarled low, a sound that seemed to echo with the weight of ancient battle cries, yet did not attack. Her cubs pressed closer, their small bodies trembling, but their eyes alight with a fragile hope. The Galactic Council's orders were clear. These creatures were to be terminated without exception. Any interference meant exile, or worse. But Daryl's life on the fringes of space, scraping by amid starship wreckage and forgotten junkyards, had taught him that sometimes laws born of fear and control were meant to be broken. He gripped a piece of salvaged rations, tossing it carefully toward the cubs. They hesitated, but hunger won over fear, and the youngest scampered forward, its fur matted and dusty. Slowly, the others joined, their trust growing as the wolf observed silently, her eyes never leaving Daryl. The mechanic's mind raced. How had the Galactic Federation allowed such a cruel fate? Why abandon such magnificent creatures to die in this hellish wasteland? Something was wrong here, something darker than the official story. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the ground. The desert sand stirred violently, and distant engines roared. Daryl's heart pounded. Patrol drones, the Federation's sentinels programmed to enforce termination orders, were closing in. "Not today," he whispered, urgency sharpening his resolve. He ripped a tarp from his pack and bundled the cubs inside, securing them as best he could. The wolf hesitated, her primal instinct screaming to fight or flee. Instead, she did something unexpected. She stepped back and let Daryl lead her offspring away from the enclosure. Running was a challenge. Every step risked exposure. Every shadow could hide a deadly enemy. Yet Daryl's knowledge of scavenging and survival on the fringe worlds became their greatest asset. Navigating through the rocky outcrops, he found a hidden cave system he'd noticed earlier, a natural fortress where no drone dared enter. Inside, the wolf and her cubs collapsed, exhausted but alive. Daryl knelt, wiping sweat and grime from his face. "You're safe for now," he murmured. But safety was a fleeting illusion in a galaxy that feared and hated anything it couldn't control. He looked down at the trembling cubs and thought of his own lonely childhood. How often he had wished for a guardian, for something fierce and true to fight by his side. He wasn't just saving beasts. He was igniting a spark that could challenge the cold indifference of the Galactic Federation. And somewhere, far away, watchers in shadow would be taking note. Daryl barely had time to catch his breath before the ominous hum of Federation patrol drones echoed through the rocky caverns. The desert was a vast expanse, but even its endless dunes and jagged cliffs offered little sanctuary from the reach of the Galactic Federation's relentless enforcers. The wolf mother lay protectively over her cubs, her eyes sharp and alert despite her exhaustion. Daryl scanned the dim cave entrance, heart hammering as the faint blue glow of approaching scanners cast eerie shadows on the walls. "They'll find us soon," he whispered, voice tight with urgency. He quickly rummaged through his worn backpack, pulling out a compact comm device. The screen flickered weakly, its signal barely intact amidst the interference of the rocky terrain. He tapped the device nervously, sending an encrypted distress beacon to the only person he trusted. Captain Sarah Miles, a rebel operative rumored to be fighting the Federation's oppressive reach from within. Come on," Daryl muttered, sweat beading at his brow. Meanwhile, outside the cave, the patrol drones swarmed the area with unyielding precision. Their sensors methodically scanned every crevice and shadow, guided by the Federation's cold logic that had already sentenced the wolf and her cubs to death. Back inside, the cubs stirred, sensing the mounting danger. One whimpered softly, and the mother wolf rose, her instincts blazing as she faced the cave's entrance. Despite Daryl's efforts to keep them hidden, the merciless mechanical eyes would not be fooled for long. "Stay calm," Daryl urged, pulling out a makeshift weapon fashioned from salvaged parts, a short-range EMP device designed to disable electronics temporarily. It was a desperate gambit, but it might buy them precious minutes. Outside, the drone sensors locked onto the cave. Blue beams of light swept through the darkness, and the faint metallic whirring grew louder. Daryl's fingers tightened around the trigger. Just as the first drone hovered at the cave's mouth, a sharp crack echoed through the air. The EMP device fired. The lights flickered and died. A brief silence followed, broken only by the rapid panting of Daryl and the low growls of the wolf. "Gotcha," Daryl breathed. But the relief was short-lived. From the shadows of the desert emerged figures clad in dark armor, Galactic Federation bounty hunters, known for their ruthless efficiency. They moved with deadly grace, unfazed by the drone outage. Daryl's heart sank. This was no longer just a rescue mission. It was a fight for survival. He glanced at the wolf, whose eyes now reflected a wild determination, a willingness to fight alongside him. "We either stand together, or we die alone," Daryl said, voice steady despite the fear gnawing inside. The battle was about to begin. The bounty hunters closed in like shadows of death, their sleek black armor blending seamlessly with the darkening desert night. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy, and their movements were precise, practiced, and utterly merciless. Daryl tightened his grip on the makeshift EMP device, but he knew its effects were temporary. His mind raced. They were vastly outnumbered, outgunned, and deep in hostile territory. The wolf, sensing the threat, growled low and fierce, baring razor-sharp teeth as her cubs huddled behind her. One of the hunters stepped forward, a towering figure with a visor that glowed blood red. Hand over the beast. The voice was cold, mechanical, and void of mercy. Or you will be eliminated. Daryl's jaw clenched. Over my dead body. The wolf's growl escalated into a fierce snarl. The cubs scattered, slipping into narrow crevices in the cave walls where the hunters' weapons might not reach them. Daryl knew they needed a plan. There was no way to outrun the hunters in the open desert, and the drones would be back online in moments. Stay close, Daryl whispered to the wolf, pulling a rough map from his jacket pocket, a relic from better days, marked with safe routes and hidden outposts. We're going to have to fight our way through, he muttered. Suddenly the lead hunter lunged forward, firing a pulse rifle. Daryl barely dove to the side, the blast scorching the rock where he had stood moments before. He fired the EMP again, but the hunters were armored against such attacks. They barely flinched. The wolf charged, her claws ripping through one hunter's armor, forcing the others to fall back momentarily. Daryl took the chance to grab one of the hunter's discarded weapons, a plasma pistol, and returned fire. The bursts of glowing blue energy lit the cave in sharp flashes. The battle raged fiercely. Daryl's lungs burned from the desert heat and adrenaline, but his resolve hardened. Every shot, every movement was fueled by the lives depending on him, the wolf and her cubs. Then, a deafening roar shook the cave. From deeper within, the cubs emerged, now grown enough to fight alongside their mother. Their small but vicious forms lunged at the hunters, clawing and biting with desperate ferocity. The hunters faltered, caught off guard by the sudden pack attack. Daryl saw his chance. Run! He shouted, grabbing the wolf's flank as they bolted into the labyrinth of tunnels leading out of the cave. Behind them, the hunters regrouped, but the wolf pack's tenacity and Daryl's guerrilla tactics gave them precious seconds. Emerging into the desert night, Daryl spotted a faint glow on the horizon, a hidden outpost marked on his map. Almost there, he gasped. The wolf's eyes met his, fierce, grateful, alive, but the hunters would not give up. The desert echoed with their relentless pursuit. Daryl pushed himself harder, every step a battle against exhaustion. In this hostile galaxy, mercy was a luxury. Survival was a war, and Daryl had just declared it. The hidden outpost was little more than a forgotten relic, half buried beneath endless dunes and long abandoned by the Galactic Federation. Yet to Daryl and the wolf pack, it was a beacon of hope, a fragile sanctuary in the unforgiving desert. The air inside was stale and thick with dust, but it held one critical advantage: defense systems long offline, waiting to be reactivated. Daryl moved quickly, wiping sweat and sand from his brow as he accessed the control panel. The wolf and her cubs circled the room, alert and restless, their ears twitching at every sound. Suddenly, the distant hum of engines echoed through the canyon's mouth. "They're coming," Daryl whispered, a bitter edge creeping into his voice. Outside, the alien bounty hunters' ships descended like dark vultures, their weapons locked and ready. Daryl's fingers flew over the control panel, struggling to reboot the outpost's ancient turrets and energy shields. "We're not out of this yet," he muttered. The wolf's growl reverberated through the chamber, a warning and a promise of fierce resistance. Minutes dragged like hours. Then, the outpost blinked to life. Turrets spun into position, holographic barriers shimmered into existence, and automated defenses hummed ominously. The first wave of hunters charged forward, their armor gleaming menacingly under the harsh artificial lights. Plasma bolts flew, colliding with the outpost's shields. Daryl grabbed a heavy blaster and fired back, his every shot precise and fueled by desperation. The wolf and her cubs sprang into the fray, claws flashing and teeth snapping with lethal precision. But the hunters were relentless. They pushed harder, adapting quickly to the defenders' tactics. Amid the chaos, Daryl's mind raced. They needed more than just defense. They needed an escape plan. Scanning the outpost's schematics, he spotted an old escape tunnel, sealed for decades, but possibly intact. "Follow me," he barked, signaling the wolf pack. They fought their way through narrow corridors, shadows flickering against the walls as alarms blared. Behind them, the hunters' reinforcements arrived, their numbers overwhelming. Just as they reached the tunnel's entrance, a massive explosion shook the outpost, sending shards of metal flying. Daryl stumbled, pain lancing through his side, but he kept moving. Inside the tunnel, darkness swallowed them. The wolf's glowing eyes cut through the gloom, guiding the cubs and Daryl through the labyrinth beneath the desert. For a moment, silence settled, broken only by the distant rumble of battle above. Daryl leaned against the cold wall, gasping for breath. "We made it. For now," he whispered. The wolf nuzzled his hand gently, a silent vow of trust. But outside, the war was far from over. The hunters would not rest, and neither would Daryl. The darkness of the escape tunnel clung to Daryl's skin like a second shadow. But ahead, a faint glow flickered. An exit leading toward the vast, open desert. Behind them, the roar of destruction echoed through the depths of the outpost, a grim reminder that their enemies were relentless. Daryl pushed forward, every breath ragged, every step heavy with pain. The wolf and her cubs followed close, their trust unwavering. The bond between them had grown stronger than any words could express. In this desolate place they had found a family, one forged in fire and survival. As they emerged from the tunnel into the blinding heat of the desert sun, Daryl scanned the horizon. The bounty hunter's ship still hovered, scanning the sand for any sign of life. But the sprawling dunes and swirling sandstorms offered cover, a natural fortress. "We need to keep moving," Daryl said. His voice was hoarse but resolute. "If we stay here, they'll find us. But out there—" He gestured toward the horizon, where jagged mountain ranges pierced the sky. "There's a place I know, an old rebel base. If we can make it, maybe we can finally turn the tide." The wolf growled softly, as if understanding the gravity of the plan. Her cubs nuzzled her side, their youthful eyes reflecting hope. The journey ahead was treacherous, months of survival through hostile terrain, battling scorching days and freezing nights. But Daryl had learned from the wolves. Endurance, cunning, and loyalty were their greatest weapons. Days passed under the relentless sun. The pack hunted for water, scavenged for food, and avoided patrols. Daryl patched his wounds as best he could, fueled by a determination that burned brighter than any pain. One evening, as the sky turned violet and stars blinked awake, they reached the foothills of the mountains. A silhouette of ruined structures appeared, half swallowed by overgrowth, a testament to a forgotten rebellion. Daryl's heart quickened. This is it, sanctuary. But as they approached, the ground trembled. From the shadows emerged figures clad in dark armor, the Galactic Federation's elite strike force sent to eradicate any resistance. Daryl's pulse surged. The wolf bared her teeth, growling low and fierce. The cubs crouched, ready to fight or flee. "No more running," Daryl whispered. "This ends here." The battle erupted with savage intensity. Daryl fired his blaster with expert precision, while the wolf leapt into the fray, her claws rending through armor and flesh alike. The cubs, though young, fought with ferocity born of desperation. Amid the chaos, Daryl spotted a control panel. If he could trigger the base's defense grid, they might gain the upper hand. Dodging plasma bolts, he sprinted to the console, fingers dancing over worn keys. With a hiss, automated turrets powered up, their lasers cutting swaths through the enemy ranks. The tide turned. By dawn, the strike force lay defeated, their ships fleeing into the sky. Breathing heavily, Daryl looked over the battlefield. The wolf approached, her eyes bright with triumph and gratitude. "You saved us all," she seemed to say. For the first time in ages, Daryl allowed himself a smile. They had fought impossible odds, endured betrayal and pain, But here, in the wastelands between stars, they had found hope. The wolf pack would rebuild. Humanity had forged an unlikely alliance with alien creatures, abandoned by their own. Together, they would challenge the Galactic Federation's tyranny and fight for a future where no one would be left to die alone. As the twin suns rose over the mountains, Daryl stood tall. This was not just survival. It was the dawn of a new legend.